Hi, Tom. You left this comment on Bertie May's video talking about the Southern Baptist Convention voting to push women out of pastoral leadership, a vote that gained steam in the last few years as the allegations of rampant sexual abuse within the Southern Baptist Convention started to come out and their protection of predators became public, because who do you think was bringing those accusations and standing by the victims? But because this theology has benefited you so much and your spiritual authority has never been under threat, you have never engaged with it in a scholarly manner, you have never studied the Bible, you likely haven't read it cover to cover, but thankfully for both of us, I have done all those things. And you went to the first two verses that men of your ilk could go to exclude women from leadership and give divine authority to yourself. And the first one is 1 Timothy 2:11 through 12. Paul didn't write it. Paul didn't write 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, or Titus. These are well-known pseudepigraphal texts that were written by someone who lied about being Paul in order to establish a hierarchy that was more palatable to second century men who wanted women out of church leadership, because up to that point in the early church, women were leaders. We see this in Romans 16, which Paul did write, that he nominated the only deacon we know by name, and her name was Phoebe. He also commends women who are apostles, church planners, teachers of men who teach them a better gospel, and he commends them. The name there at the end of that passage where he says Junia the apostle was mistranslated for centuries intentionally to Junius so that they could claim that women couldn't be apostles. But we know Paul wrote that letter. He didn't write 1 Timothy. We know that Paul wrote Romans, 1 and 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Philippians, 1 Thessalonians, and Philemon. Those are the only established Pauline books that we have. That's right, ladies. He didn't write Ephesians or Colossians either. But you then go to 1 Corinthians 14, 34 through 35. Again, another one of these clobber verses you men love to grab on. That is an interpolation that does not exist in the original manuscripts. It was added later by scribes because Paul in 1 Corinthians is telling women how they can show up and prophesy in the church in an orderly manner, giving them permission to speak. And in order to negate what Paul just said, they added an interpolation that women should be silent. It was added by men like you who benefit from ripping the spiritual authority from women. You didn't give spiritual authority, and you cannot take away that spiritual authority. You want to claim also, you reach into Genesis in this comment, because the doctrine of Eve teaches that women are responsible for sin, even though Genesis 1 and 2 not only contradict each other, they come from two different manuscripts and they are based on ancient myths that predate them by centuries, but were used as an excuse to blame women for sin they did not commit. It is a mythological story used to justify the subjugation of women by men like you, because if women's natural position was to submit, we would have done it already. It wouldn't take a liar claiming to be Paul. It wouldn't take false theology, violence, threats, and indoctrination to push women in the shadows, because as much as you try, women will not stay there. And it is amazing to me that as these sexual abuse allegations come forward, the push of men like you pushes women out of authority that would hold them accountable.